Pets are often cherished as loyal companions and beloved members of the family, bringing joy and comfort to our lives. However, there are shocking and tragic instances where these trusted animals have turned deadly, attacking their owners in plain sight. This collection explores real-life stories of pets that unleashed unimaginable horror, transforming peaceful homes and everyday moments into scenes of fear and devastation. From familiar settings to unexpected locations, these accounts reveal how quickly trust can dissolve when an animal's instincts override their bond with humans, leaving communities to grapple with the devastating consequences of these horrifying betrayals. Kellyanne Walls, October 4th, 2009. Under a crisp autumn sun, a hilltop property in Ross Township, Pennsylvania, glowed with the season's shifting colors. For more than 15 years, Kellyanne and Michael Walls had cared for exotic animals, lions, tigers, leopards, and a towering black bear named Teddy, each in its own enclosure to protect neighbors as well as the unusual residents. That morning, the couple went about their daily tasks, surrounded by creatures most people only saw in zoos or on television. Kellyanne's love for animals began in her Massachusetts childhood, nurtured by 4-H club and competitive riding. After marrying Michael, she pursued the credentials to legally keep exotic species, and by 1994, their property had become a private sanctuary with reinforced fencing, posted warnings, and strict feeding schedules. Neighbors admired the well-maintained enclosures, occasionally pausing to watch lions and tigers roaming under the Walls family's meticulous care. Among all these powerful creatures, Teddy stood out. He was a black bear with a towering presence, easily capable of reaching 6 feet tall when he rose on his hind legs. His weight hovered around 350 pounds, and yet he sometimes appeared to exhibit an almost gentle curiosity toward the people around him. Kellyanne had helped raise Teddy from a cub, feeding him bottles in the early days, and gradually introducing him to an enclosure built specifically for a bear of his size. She saw in him not just a display of raw animal strength, but a living symbol of her lifelong passion. Treats like popcorn or small pieces of fruit were her way of bonding with him, tiny rituals that she believed reinforced their connection. Teddy's reactions to these treats suggested a tame sweetness, though a closer look at his muscled frame and thick claws reminded everyone that a wild heart still beat beneath his fur. Over the years, Kellyanne had grown confident. She moved through her routines with practiced efficiency, checking enclosures for loose fencing, clearing debris, and distributing feed. Her children often accompanied her, just as they did this cool Sunday morning. The family relied on a comfortable familiarity with the animals, a sense that each creature respected the boundaries set by its environment. This confidence extended to the rest of the community as well. People felt secure knowing that the enclosures met state regulations and that Kellyanne had years of first-hand experience. Yet as the trees began shedding their leaves and the temperatures dipped, subtle shifts in an animal's behavior could be easily overlooked, and in Teddy's case, an undercurrent of restlessness took shape. That morning, neighbors caught sight of Kellyanne as she rolled out a wheelbarrow and gathered cleaning tools near Teddy's 15 by 15 foot enclosure. One neighbor, Scott, was outside with his own children, enjoying the cool weather. He called a friendly greeting, and Kellyanne waved back, smiling. Her plan was to start the day by cleaning Teddy's cage and providing fresh food, just as she had done countless times before. Despite the knowledge that black bears are powerful and unpredictable, Kellyanne believed her established methods would see her through the morning chores without issue. With her wheelbarrow propped against the enclosure's side, Kellyanne opened the gate slightly, careful to keep Teddy's attention on a pile of dog food that she tossed into a corner of the pen. The bear, seemingly drawn by the promise of breakfast, ambled away to inspect the morsels. Kellyanne stepped inside, shovel in hand, her movements brisk as she scooped up waste and debris. She aimed to finish quickly before the bear lost interest in the food. For a few moments, the only sounds were the rustling of leaves in the mild breeze, the scraping of the shovel against the cage floor, and the soft crunch of dog food as Teddy chewed. Then in a split second, the dynamic shifted. Teddy paused his feeding and turned toward Kellyanne. Perhaps it was a slight noise, a motion out of the corner of his eye, or even a sudden wave of instinct that pulled his focus away from the meal. The bear lunged, covering the short distance in a flash of raw power. Before Kellyanne could respond, he knocked her down, and his jaws clamped around her shoulder with terrifying force. She cried out, and her children watching from the porch began screaming for help. Scott heard the commotion and realized something had gone terribly wrong. He sprinted toward his house to grab a firearm, shouting for the children to stay back. In the few seconds it took him to return, the attack escalated. Kellyanne struggled beneath the bear's crushing weight, unable to break free. The sheer power of a 350-pound predator overwhelmed any hope of defense. Her screams subsided to gasps as Scott took aim from outside the enclosure. His first shot struck Teddy in the abdomen, staggering the animal but failing to end the assault. A second shot hit the bear's neck, causing him to collapse onto the ground. Even then, Scott fired additional rounds to ensure Teddy posed no further threat. Emergency vehicles arrived to find a scene drenched in horror. Kellyanne lay motionless, her injuries grievous and clearly beyond medical intervention. The heavy body of Teddy, now dead from multiple gunshot wounds, sprawled nearby as a bleak reminder of how quickly captivity can give way to primal violence. Paramedics and law enforcement officers worked with solemn efficiency, trying to preserve some sense of order, while Kellyanne's children stood by in shock. Within minutes, she was pronounced dead, leaving responders and neighbors grappling with the magnitude of the tragedy. In the hours that followed, word of the tragedy quickly spread through Ross Township. News crews arrived to cover the seemingly unthinkable story of a dedicated caretaker, with years of experience, fatally mauled by the very creature she had raised. Neighbors recalled Kellyanne's generosity and diligence, praising the well-maintained enclosures and the clear warning signs around the property. They spoke of her volunteer work at the Faith Christian School in Roseto, remembering her willingness to help anyone in need, and they struggled to reconcile that selfless spirit with the harrowing events of the day. As disbelief gave way to questions, attention turned to the absence of a secondary barrier and the bear's unaddressed agitation in the weeks leading up to fall. An examination of the family's permits revealed that Michael's license to house exotic animals had expired the previous year, compounding concerns about oversight. Experts warned that even a lifetime of careful handling couldn't override a wild animal's inherent instincts. In the days that followed, calls for stricter laws and more frequent inspections emerged, with some pointing to the inherent risks of privately keeping large predators, and others insisting this was a freak accident. All agreed, however, that the outcome underscored a stark truth. A wild creature can never be entirely tamed by familiarity alone. Kellyanne Walls' harrowing encounter with her familiar predator in Ross Township unveiled the hidden perils of domesticated wild animals. Yet as whispers of her tragedy faded, far away in Zanesville, Ohio, shadows were gathering once more. Terry Thompson's obsession with exotic creatures was quietly intensifying, setting the stage for a night where control would slip into chaos. Just as Kellyanne faced the untamed wrath of a creature she thought she knew, Terry was unknowingly on the brink of unleashing a nightmare that would echo the unpredictable fury of the wild, reminding everyone that nature's true power remains ever elusive and dangerous. Terry Thompson, October 18, 2011. A cool evening breeze drifted across the fields of Zanesville, Ohio, where Terry Thompson's 73-acre property stood in quiet disarray. Thompson was a 62-year-old Vietnam War veteran whose life had seen dramatic highs and lows. His passion for animals had begun decades earlier, marked by the purchase of a lion cub in 1977 as a gift for his wife, Marion. Over the years, he amassed an ever-growing menagerie: lions, tigers, bears, wolves, baboons, thrilling some neighbors but unnerving others who questioned the safety of makeshift cages. Yet the bristling undercurrent of danger on his property was only half the story. Beneath his fascination with wild creatures, Thompson's own world was unraveling. Financial strain and legal troubles mounted when he was convicted on federal firearms charges in 2008. The year he spent behind bars took its toll, leaving him isolated, paranoid, and increasingly fixated on suspicions that Marion had been unfaithful. After his release, his economic problems deepened. Caring for dozens of exotic animals became a burden as he struggled to pay for their food, upkeep, and veterinary costs. For months, friends and acquaintances noticed he was withdrawing, displaying erratic behavior that hinted at a brewing crisis. By the fall of 2011, the tension at the Thompson home had become palpable, and concerns about the animal's welfare and Thompson's fragile state were on the rise. In the late afternoon of October 18, as the sun dipped below the horizon, neighbors had no inkling that their quiet Ohio town was about to be thrust into chaos. Thompson, mired in debt and grappling with festering anger, roamed his property with wire cutters and raw chicken, releasing lions and tigers from their cages and scattering food to lure them into the open. When his grim work was done, he walked to his front yard, raised a handgun, and ended his life. By the time officers arrived, night had fully fallen. Thompson's body lay partially consumed by one of his own tigers, an unthinkable precursor to the horrors rapidly spreading through the surrounding countryside. As darkness took hold, neighbor and seasoned horseman Sam Kopchak sensed something was wrong. His mare, Red, was agitated, snorting and pawing at the ground. Peering into the gathering shadows, he spotted a lumbering black bear ambling near the paddock fence. That alone was startling enough, but then he noticed a fully grown African lion just beyond, its mane a silhouette against the fading light. Frozen by the realization that little stood between him and the lion's raw power, Kopchak quickly ushered Red into the barn, bolted the doors, and punched 911 into his phone. His voice shook as he described what lay outside. Inside that barn, each minute crawled by in tense silence. Through the dusty windows, Kopchak watched the undergrowth rippling with movement. First, a pair of wolves emerged, their eyes glowing in the faint moonlight as they slunk toward neighboring homes. Then a tiger appeared, its sleek body coiled with strength, stripes shifting like shadows in the dim light. A lioness materialized next, edging along a fence line as though sniffing out potential prey. Kopchak clutched his phone, heart hammering against his ribcage as he imagined the flimsy wooden doors splintering under the weight of a determined predator. Beyond Kopchak's property, the chaos spread like wildfire. A soccer coach conducting an evening practice half a mile away called emergency services, his voice cracking with fear as he reported a tiger pacing the edge of the field. Parents gathered their children in a rush, casting anxious glances over their shoulders as they hurried away. Elsewhere, a motorist slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting a black bear meandering across a rural road, headlights catching the bristle of its fur. Law enforcement arrived to a surreal scene. The silhouettes of lions and tigers prowled near Thompson's driveway, while bears lumbered into adjacent yards, frightening residents who had locked their doors and switched off lights in an effort to avoid drawing attention. Some officers, confronted with the immediate threat of large predators in motion, had no choice but to fire. Tranquilizer darts were unavailable to most on-scene personnel, and with darkness falling, even a successful darting would take precious minutes to subdue the animals. With the safety of citizens in jeopardy, lethal force became the only practical means of containing the spreading danger. Gunshots echoed across the fields as officers attempted to halt roaming lions or corner tigers before they reached more densely populated areas. Some animals stood their ground, eyes flashing in the glare of cruiser headlights. Others darted away, forcing pursuit through thick brush and farmland. Each encounter brought harrowing moments as officers faced creatures possessing incredible strength and unpredictable instincts. All the while, frantic 911 calls continued. Sightings at back doors, glimpses of massive shapes in alleyways. The roar of big cats carried on the evening wind. When dawn finally broke, it revealed the horrifying extent of the carnage. 48 of Thompson's 50 released animals lay dead, scattered across roads and fields. Bears, wolves, lions, and tigers cut down to protect the public. Among the living, only a bear and a monkey remained caged and were safely removed. Investigators, stepping through the disordered remnants of Thompson's house, found signs of neglect and emotional strain, underscoring a tragic combination of personal turmoil and deadly oversight. The days following the Zanesville incident were marked by shock and soul-searching. Many questioned how one individual could accumulate such a dangerous assortment of animals without tighter regulations. Others pointed to Thompson's time in prison for federal firearms charges, his resulting financial woes, and his growing paranoia, warning signs that had gone unnoticed until it was too late. Whatever the underlying motives, this single act had transformed an ordinary Ohio town into a scene of surreal devastation, forcing residents and authorities alike to confront the lethal reality of allowing wild predators to live among them. Following Terry Thompson's tragic death at the hands of his own tiger, Ronald Huff met a similar fate when his beloved Nile monitor lizards turned on him. Both men's deep bonds with their exotic pets ultimately led to their demise, revealing that no matter the care or control, wild instincts can remain dangerously untamed. Ronald Huff. January 16, 2002. A biting winter wind swept through the Ridgewood Manor apartments in Newark, Delaware, chilling the residents who passed by a particular door from which an unsettling odor crept. That smell, sharp and unmistakably foul, prompted neighbor Jeff Wong to make inquiries about Ronald Huff, the 42-year-old former soldier living alone behind those walls. No one had seen Ronald for days, and a terrible dread settled in as neighbors realized something was very wrong. Ronald led a disciplined life, shaped by his military background, but had an abiding fascination with 7 Nile monitor lizards, large, striking reptiles that often grow to 6 feet or more. Often referred to as Lizard Boy by his colleagues, he reveled in sharing stories about his pets, proudly showing off minor bite marks or scratches. To Ronald, these lizards were family, slithering freely through his apartment and basking in the glow of his unwavering devotion. Yet despite the easy familiarity he felt, the creatures he harbored were far from docile pets. Nile monitors are known for their fearsome teeth, powerful tails, and a mildly venomous bite that can cause extensive bleeding, swelling, and infection. In the wild, they stalk prey with stealth and aggression, their muscular bodies perfectly adapted to chase or ambush. Captivity does little to quell these instincts, which can surface at the faintest hint of potential prey. A glimpse into Ronald's daily life showed a man who treated these reptiles with an almost parental affection, letting them lounge on his bed, climb his furniture, and roam wherever they pleased. Neighbors occasionally heard scratching sounds through the walls or caught a fleeting glimpse of a reptilian form through a half-open door. Most assumed Ronald knew how to handle them. Few realized how unpredictable the monitors could become if something disrupted their routine. In the days before January 16th, Ronald seemed to vanish. Though uncharacteristic, his absences initially went unnoticed. He lived alone and rarely socialized beyond work. Before long, an overpowering stench drifted through the building's corridors, so pungent it drove Jeff Wong to press his ear against Ronald's door. After several attempts to reach him, law enforcement was finally summoned. When officers forced the door open, they were met by a blast of decay that made them recoil. A single light bulb illuminated the cramped, cluttered apartment, its furniture shoved against the walls. The floor was littered with overturned bowls and scattered cockroach shells, remnants of the lizard's usual meals. At the center of the living room lay Ronald, his body slumped on its side, partially blocking a door. He bore horrific injuries with deep wounds carved into his arms and legs, and wide gashes exposing bone where strips of flesh had been torn away. The sight was made more nightmarish by the presence of the 7 Nile monitors looming among the debris, their forked tongues darting out to taste the air. Smeared with blood around their snouts and claws, they appeared both agitated and strangely possessive, as though guarding a fresh kill. Investigators could only theorize how the tragic encounter unfolded. Perhaps Ronald had gone to feed them, opening the refrigerator that normally signaled mealtime. The lizards, already on edge from any delay in feeding, might have lunged at the first sign of food. A single well-placed bite, with jaws that clamped like vice grips, could leave a person weak or bleeding heavily. If Ronald fell or lost consciousness, whether from shock, infection, or another medical emergency, the monitor's natural impulses would push them to seize what they perceived as prey. Once blood was drawn, the feeding frenzy could have intensified, their predatory instincts fully activated. The apartment told its own story in grim detail. Blood spatter trailed across the floor, marking frantic movements as Ronald either tried to defend himself or collapsed. Overturned furniture suggested a violent struggle. Claw marks in the wooden floor indicated the lizards scrambled for purchase as they advanced. whipping their muscular tails and tearing at anything within reach. By the time help arrived, it was too late. The monitors appeared unafraid of the intruders, hissing and flicking their tongues in warning. Removing the reptiles was no easy task. Animal control teams arrived with specialized nooses and containment equipment, but the largest monitors resisted, snapping their jaws and lashing with their tails. One, nearly 6 feet in length, refused to budge from its place near Ronald's remains, forcing officers to maneuver carefully to avoid provoking another attack. It took time and methodical effort to subdue them all, and each capture seemed to confirm the power and ferocity these creatures still possessed. The post-mortem examination revealed that Ronald had sustained multiple deep wounds consistent with monitor lizard bites. Some showed signs of feeding, while others bore the ragged edges of defensive attempts. Puncture marks on his hands hinted at a struggle, as if he had tried to push the reptiles away. No signs of toxins or other incapacitating substances were found in his system, leaving investigators to assume he fell victim to the very creatures he loved so much, either through a sudden onslaught while alive or scavenging, if death had claimed him first. News of Ronald's demise spread rapidly through Newark, leaving residents grappling with equal parts horror and disbelief. Many questioned how someone could safely keep so many large, predatory reptiles in a modest apartment. Wildlife experts pointed to the incident as a stark warning. No matter how long a wild animal has lived in captivity, its base instincts can resurface in an instant. The illusions of familiarity and control are easily shattered when hunger, stress, or even the smell of blood awakens the predator within. For those who knew Ronald, the tragedy remained a perplexing cautionary tale. He had poured his heart into caring for these reptiles, even resigning himself to living in a confined space so they could roam freely. Yet the final tableau in his living room attested to nature's relentless power, a reminder that, with some creatures, the line separating caretaker from prey is as thin and perilous as a reptile's razor-sharp tooth. Following Ronald Huff's tragic demise at the hands of his Nile monitor lizards, another shadowy tale began to unfold. Christian Prinsloo, a devoted young boy with a deep love for animals, found his sanctuary turning into a nightmare. Just as Ronald had trusted his reptiles, Christian's bond with wild predators led to an unimaginable tragedy. Both stories whisper of the fragile line between care and chaos, revealing that even the most cherished connections with untamed creatures can harbor deadly secrets waiting to emerge. Christian Prinsloo, April 2017. The South African sun poured warmth over the countryside near Lefalel, marking the start of a 2-week school holiday for 12-year-old Christian Tien Prinsloo. Eager for adventure, he bounced out of the car at his grandmother's home, a quiet farmstead nestled beside vast fields and pockets of bush. Marie Stradom welcomed her grandson with a warm hug, pleased to watch him run off to explore the property that he so often referred to as his favorite place in the world. Tien soon arranged a visit with the Voss couple, old family friends who operated a small lion breeding farm nearby. The couple owned 3 adult lions, each raised from cubhood but still captive predators with potent instincts. Tien loved observing these creatures from the safety of their enclosures, marveling at their elegance and power. He had visited countless times and knew the rules. Never enter the enclosure, always stay behind the barriers, and remember that no lion is ever truly tame. Marie had heard they just walked the lions that morning, returning them to their locked pens afterward, an extra reassurance that made her comfortable bringing Tien along. That afternoon, as Marie and Mrs. Voss chatted in the kitchen, Tien drifted about the farmhouse searching for a book he had left behind. The house, a cozy rural dwelling, buzzed with activity. Teacups rattled in the kitchen, an electric fan whirred in the living room, and the smell of warm biscuits wafted through the air. Outside, Mr. Voss tidied up the yard, believing the lions were safely secured in their enclosure. Yet amid this bustle, an unsettling oversight went unnoticed. One of the gates, likely not fully latched after the lion's walk, had swung open just enough to tempt a curious predator. Moments later, a hush stole over the living room. Standing in the doorway was the massive male lion, tawny fur, a full mane, and eyes that caught the afternoon light like hot embers. Tien, rummaging through a side table for his book, sensed a presence behind him and turned. A jolt of terror coursed through him. His mind reeled at the sight of the big cat poised on the threshold, as though deciding which target to pursue. Marie, emerging from the kitchen, saw the lion and instantly put herself between it and her grandson. She motioned for Tien to move away, but panic momentarily froze him in place. The lion flexed its muscles, lowered its head, and fixed its gaze on the boy, the distance between them too short to allow any easy escape. A single second seemed to stretch into an eternity. Marie attempted to distract the animal, placing her hands out in what looked like a futile shield. Though the lion appeared eerily calm, its ears twitched forward, signifying heightened focus. Then as Tien turned to bolt for a side room, the lion sprang. Its powerful hind legs propelled it across the living room in a blur of muscle and fur, covering what seemed like an impossible distance in just a few strides. Marie lunged in to grab its mane, but a violent swipe of its paw raked across her arms, forcing her to stumble backward. Tien tried to sprint, but the lion caught him almost instantly. Its claws dug into his back, driving him to the hardwood floor with a force that knocked the air from his lungs. Pain shot through him as he felt the weight of the lion's body crushing him, pinning him in place. He screamed, but the roar of the lion drowned out everything. Marie watched in horror, struggling to regain her footing, determined to pull her grandson free despite her own wounds. She latched onto the lion's thick fur, screaming for help at the top of her lungs while it continued to clamp its jaws around Tien's shoulder. The commotion jolted Mrs. Voss to the scene. She burst from the kitchen and with remarkable composure, snatched a broom and thrust it between the lion and Tien. Distracted for a crucial moment, the lion released Tien from its jaws and swung its head to face Mrs. Voss, letting out a warning growl that reverberated through the house. Marie seized the chance to drag Tien away, noting the blood that seeped through his shirt. His breathing was ragged, eyes wide with shock as he clutched at his torn flesh. In a desperate scramble, Mrs. Voss managed to maneuver the lion out of the farmhouse entry, using the broom to guide it as best she could. Mr. Voss, alerted by the shouts, sprinted in to help subdue the lion and herd it back toward an enclosure. Meanwhile, Marie clutched her bleeding arms, her only thought to get Tien to a hospital immediately. She hoisted him to his feet, felt him sag in pain, then scooped him into her arms with an almost superhuman resolve. Shaken and soaked with blood, she carried him outside and placed him in the back seat of the Voss family's pickup. The drive to the nearest hospital was a blur. Tien lay across the seat, gasping shallowly as Marie applied pressure to his wounds. She urged the driver to go faster, her heart pounding so fiercely it felt as though it might burst. Once at the hospital, doctors worked frantically to staunch the bleeding and stabilize Tien, but the severity of his injuries became evident within minutes. He was transferred to a more advanced facility in Pretoria for surgery, yet the damage to his spine and organs was overwhelming. Though he clung to life for 3 excruciating weeks, Tien passed away on April 26th, just one day after his 12th birthday, leaving his family broken and devastated. In the painful aftermath, Herman and Audrey Prinsloo, Tien's parents, found themselves struggling with both grief and a desire for understanding. A child who cherished the wonder of wild animals had been claimed by one of the very creatures he admired. Yet the Prinsloos chose not to press charges. Rather than blame the lion or the Voss couple, they saw the tragic event as a reminder of nature's unyielding force. The lion, though responsible for Tien's death, was spared from euthanasia and relocated to a more secure facility. For Tien's family, the decision was a sign of their compassion, an acknowledgement that no cage and no amount of human care can fully negate a wild predator's instinct. In the end, Tien's story resonates far beyond the quiet roads of Leffelale. It underscores a heartbreaking reality. The line dividing human affection from nature's fierce unpredictability is finer than we dare admit. With one poorly latched gate in a single moment of vulnerability, an ordinary afternoon visit transformed into unspeakable tragedy, forever etching Tien's memory into the conscience of a community that learned how quickly the rhythms of rural life can descend into chaos. These intertwined tragedies unveil a haunting reality. Beneath the surface of human control lies the untamable force of nature. Each story of shattered peace and lost lives shows how quickly harmony can collapse when wild instincts break free. In the aftermath, communities are left grappling with devastation, highlighting the precarious balance between care and chaos. These events illustrate that no matter the bond or precautions, the raw power of the wild remains an unpredictable and dangerous presence.